What's next after the sentence is overturned for the man found guilty of kidnapping and killing a North Dakota college student nearly 20 years ago?
Why the Biden administration is seeking billions of dollars to fund government operations.
Plus, remembering the 9/11 terror attack on the Pentagon. Valley News Live at 10 starts right now.
This is Valley News Live at 10.
I can't imagine. It just aches to hear something like this.
Tonight, reaction after the sentence was overturned for the man convicted of kidnapping and killing a UND college student nearly 2 decades ago. Convicted sex offender Alfonso Rodriguez no longer faces the death penalty.
He was found guilty of kidnapping Drew Shadeen from a mall parking lot. Her body not found until months later. Valley News Live's Nishay Taylor spoke with a man who worked closely with law enforcement to help find Shadeen's remains.
Extremely disappointed. I mean, I just paused and had the whole situation flash through my mind. This happened 18 years ago.
In 2003, Drew Shadeen, a 22-year-old University of North Dakota student, had gone missing.
Everybody ready? Let's find her today. Let's go get Drew.
Bob Heelis, a former private investigator, helped organize searches for Drew at the time of her disappearance.
I saw the news story and I immediately knew I had to get up there and do whatever I could, even if it was just being another set of eyes.
Drew's remains were found several months later. She had been kidnapped and murdered. Alfonso Rodriguez had been sentenced to death for the slaying of the college student. But in a turn of events, a federal judge threw out the sentencing. Bob says he believes the decision now sets precedents for other cases similar to this one.
This case is an extreme example of why we have the death penalty for cases like this. I mean, if you're not going to use it in a case like this, then where are you going to use it?
He also says hearing the news of the sentencing being overturned is very difficult for him, especially on a case that still tugs at his heart.
I think my 37-year career, this is the one that sticks out in my mind as something I'll absolutely never forget. What he did was just one of the most horrific things that somebody can ever imagine. And this should have been over a long time ago.
Nishay Taylor, Valley News Live.
Now, Judge Ralph Erickson ruled that misleading testimony from the medical examiner and limitations on mental health violated Rodriguez's constitutional rights.
Judge Erickson is now ordering a new sentencing. Will continue to follow this case closely.
New tonight at 10, a Dalton, Minnesota man is facing an attempted murder charge and an assault charge after allegedly firing a handgun in Otter Tail County Friday night. The sheriff's office says 37-year-old Derek Sundin crashed his pickup truck on Highway 37 near Bankers Drive and then fired his weapon after a Minnesota conservation officer responded to the scene. A SWAT team was then called in. We're told Sundin fired his gun a few more times before the SWAT team used impact shotguns against Sundin, eventually taking him into custody. A 28-year-old Walker man has been sentenced to 9 years in prison after killing his 1-year-old niece by backing over her while driving drunk and then fleeing the scene. Anthony Goose was convicted for criminal vehicular homicide today for operating a vehicle with negligence and while under the influence of alcohol. According to the criminal complaint, Goose backed his SUV out of the driveway, ran over the child, and then struck debris at the end of the driveway. Documents state Goose had a blood alcohol level of .123. 2 people were injured in a rollover crash involving an ATV in Bena, Minnesota that happened Sunday in the Chippewa National Forest. Officials say the 23-year-old driver lost control of the ATV, causing it to roll. He suffered serious injuries and was airlifted to a hospital in Duluth. A female passenger was also taken to an area hospital. The crash remains under investigation.
A West Fargo man says a woman used a fake cashier's check to buy his Chevy Tahoe over the weekend. Our investigative team found it's the same woman previously convicted of forgery.
I asked $3,500 and she said, "Will you take $3,200 and a cashier's check?" And I said, "That will work."
Jesse Sackman, seen there, says it wasn't until the woman was long gone with his SUV when he noticed Bell Bank was misspelled on that check and other errors that caused him to think the check was a fake. He filed a police report and the bank confirmed the check was no good. For much more on this story, visit our website, valleynewslive.com. Have you seen this vehicle? The West Fargo Police Department is attempting to identify the driver and get any information leading to his or her whereabouts. If you have any information, you're asked to call the West Fargo PD tip line 701-515-5333. In Fergus Falls yesterday, a vehicle nearly caught an apartment building on fire, and the vehicle's owners and a bystander are credited with putting out the blaze. That happened at 913 East Vernon Avenue. That vehicle was within 5 feet of the apartment building. The vehicle's owners and the bystander used fire extinguishers to work on the fire. Firefighters say their efforts kept damage to the exterior of the building. Damage is estimated at $15,000.
A young Minnesota man remains on a ventilator and unresponsive tonight after being diagnosed with a severe case of West Nile virus late last week. Doctors at Sanford Health are continuing to monitor 24-year-old Dryden Thompson's brain swelling and seizure activity. But today, they had some good news for Thompson's family as he responded for the first time to nurses' commands.
He opened his eyes for a little bit, squeezed the hand of the nurse, wiggled his toes. So we're getting there. Little by little, there's little news, good news.
Now you can read more about the young man and his family and see ways to donate the family by heading to our VNL News app and clicking on this story.
Tonight we're told COVID may soon be one of the leading causes of death in North Dakota. COVID-19 ranked third as a leading cause of death in 2020, according to the State Department of Health, behind heart disease and cancer. Total deaths in the state rose from 6,611 in 2019 to 7,938 in 2020. The numbers of deaths from heart disease and cancer were largely unchanged. The main contributor to that increase was coronavirus, with 1,159 deaths attributed to the virus in 2020. Meanwhile, influenza and pneumonia killed 157 people in 2019, 158 people last year. New numbers are showing children now represent more than 1/4 of the reported weekly COVID-19 cases nationwide. Data from the American Academy of Pediatrics shows more than 250,000 child cases of COVID were reported in the past week alone. That's the largest number of child cases since the start of the pandemic. But even though the cases are higher, having a severe reaction is uncommon in children. Data shows child COVID-19 hospitalizations range from 0.1% to 1.9%. Also, the definition of a child varies by state, but is generally up to age 18.
Americans think the current government is not doing a good job communicating its COVID-19 plans. That's according to a new Gallup poll published today. The poll asked 3,500 Americans if they agreed that the CDC is clearly communicating its COVID-19 plans. 32% of those surveyed agreed the CDC had, quote, communicated a clear plan of action. More than 40% disagreed.
In order to keep the government funded this month, the Biden administration is asking for billions of dollars. That includes funding for COVID testing for migrants at the border, more than $6 billion for Afghan refugees, and more than $14 billion to help with recovery from recent natural disasters. The Biden administration is also asking Congress to separately pass $150 billion for what's described as clean energy and climate change resilience funding. 4 former detainees held at Guantanamo Bay who were released in 2014 have been given leadership positions by the Taliban. The men were detained by the U.S. at Guantanamo early in the war in Afghanistan. However, the Obama administration released them as part of a prisoner swap for U.S. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. Bergdahl was captured by the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2009 and held captive for nearly 5 years. According to the Taliban, those 4 men were given senior positions today in the Taliban's caretaker government.
El Salvador became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as a national currency today amid large protests against the move in the capital city. Bitcoin will be used as legal tender along with the U.S. dollar throughout the country. All businesses are required to accept it, and it can also be used to pay for taxes. To use Bitcoin, Salvadorans will be able to download an app through which the government will give people $30 worth of Bitcoin to promote the cryptocurrency's use. Social organizations have asked the government to repeal the law, expressing concerns over Bitcoin's volatility.
Still ahead tonight, countless stories of heroism followed the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We'll bring you one of them from the man behind the emergency response.
But first, Hutch joins us with a forecast that includes a few more chances for showers. Stay with us.